Okay, here we are in Axis Empires, and let's take a look. Continuing with the Japanese here, they pushed quite heavily into Russian territory. Up here, into Mongolia here. Then over here they launched an attack against Vladivostok using an aircraft carrier strike. They don't want to waste their ground-based air because that's of more value against the regular Russian units. They're looking at Russia as the main foe now. They're also sliding their way up. They've grabbed the rest of Sakhalin Island, and they're positioning themselves to take part of Kamchatka. And this is really, I think we're going to see that had they picked the other chit, they've done well enough they could win. Yes, there was cheating involved to cause that to happen, or mistakes, or whatever you want to call it. But the game should probably be over very soon, the way things are falling. They've just pumped themselves up to the 12 victory points. They need 3 more. Well, what do they have? They have 1, 2, and then the third one, wherever that comes, could be here, could be one of these up here, would be sufficient to knock them over the edge. Unless, of course, the Allies can take something else. In fact, the fact that the Allies took Rabaul may have knocked that down another one, so they need another one yet. Again, and if this falls, if different things fall, it may be that the absolute victory was actually out of reach, in which case maybe this wasn't such a bad idea to take the pick they did. Over on the German side, case blue continues here. Well, first of all, nothing's happening over here. They're going to get knocked out of London, and there's a danger that an invasion of France may occur because they need to come up with troops to defend that. And right now, they've got so much on the Russian border and over here in Turkey. In Turkey, they've kind of cut the Russian line. This guy isn't in supply. He's going to have to try to figure out his way home, and that's not going to be trivial. And that'll put more and more pressure, perhaps making Tiflis fall, maybe making the whole Caucasus fall. Elsewhere, the Germans are doing pretty well, although their line here is pretty weak. They didn't use it, but they launched blitzes in 3 directions and kind of cut through here. They've managed to take Kiev, and those are Yugoslavs sitting there. And they also managed a little bit of action down here. No big breakthroughs, but they are pushing forward at a steady pace, and it's pretty hard for the Russians to do anything about it. They're pretty much having to fall back. We'll see if they can launch anything, but they look like they're on the ropes. Of course, with the entire German army down here against Russia, what happens when the Allies invade there? And that's a real... the Germans are going to have to come up with some kind of answer to that. If there's a landing, they can't maintain this kind of pressure on the Russians. And if they can't maintain this kind of pressure, they're probably going to lose the war over there. All right. I guess we'll move on to the Allies. And for the Allies, not a lot happening over here. Shifted into place to put them near Port Moresby, but they can't really get a grasp to attack it. They sent an air battle into place, and that got knocked out. And they're not quite sure how to get the amount of force they need to take it down. Right now, they've got 3 strength points attacking against a, well, actually, they do have a chance. I'm looking, they have a lot of headquarters. They could have formed a headquarters there, which would have helped. They had 3 strength points attacking too. The headquarters could give them column shifts, though, that they might need. I'll look to see how that works out and whether or not they can get the attack. But let's look over, and then nothing here. We just shipped the Americans over. We're going to create a multinational force and try to take the capital there. But over here in Britain, the last German's gone, but more exciting, a landing over at Cherbourg. And you know, hey, France is open, man. Let's just jump in. And that's going to cause real problems for the Germans. The forces that were there holding Britain could well have held against an invasion, but they couldn't hold out on an unfriendly island out of supply, apparently. All right. Okay, stepping back to that Port Moresby, if I created this force instead, moved in, made the attack with that, and I did, got a good roll, and ended up, it was not a 2-1 even, just a 3-2, but with a good roll, I was able to knock them down, and it looks like Moresby's going to fall. I wanted to use this over here, but to tell you the truth, creating that headquarters, it would have only been a 2-point headquarters there, which doesn't increase anywhere near to the degree that I'm getting the increase here. So, this is probably the better move for me. Alright. I guess we're on to the Ruskies. And for the Russians, there's not a lot they can do in the Far East. They're just kind of statically defending. They moved the headquarters up here to help defend Mongolia. But over here in the European sector, well, trying to save things here in the Caucasus. Pretty much the further south you go, the worse it is for the Russians. The Caucasus, it looks wide open. Here they've kind of built up something of a line, and it looks pretty strong, but there's a hole in it, and this is at risk. And Rostov and Sevastopol are kind of in danger at this point. Go here, well, it looks pretty solid. It looks like they pulled back with something decent. They're not in good terrain at all anywhere along here. Kharkov is the only strong point at all. Then we get here, a little bit of rough terrain to help them. But their blitz managed, and they actually had 2, but they only used 1, managed to get them some definite ground in the north. And things are looking kind of risky for the Germans here, where they had this bubble. Well, that's getting pushed back pretty hard. Alright, I think that's the end of this turn. Probably the end of my night, because it's well past my bedtime. And I'll just roll some dice and set up the delay boxes and move things forward that way. Okay, so here we are in July, August of 1944. And the Japanese moved up, started attacking the Russians. A little bit of effect, for example, in Vladivostok here, they've knocked the garrison down, but there's more troops ready to go in, and no airbase that could be, no airstrike that could be placed there to prevent them from pulling those reinforcements in because of the mud. Up here, less activity. They, I think, lost a step there. Shipping some troops down to help defend Batavia against the threat here. There was a, let's see what it was, the Bushido table ended up giving me a nationalist support roll, which allowed me to kill one of these Australian units over in Iwo Jima, and that freed Iwo Jima back up. So now the Japanese actually gained a port that way because the Allies didn't bother putting a detachment there. I didn't realize how weak that was without it. Well. Now, over on the next side, the European map, well, the Germans are trying to push some forces over, and I haven't gotten them completely into place. To get these up in Brussels, or near Brussels. To defend against a possible American-British landing. We've already got 1 U.S. unit sitting up here at Cherbourg, which I couldn't quite reach. So, there's definitely a threat there. We'll try to drive them back into the sea, but we don't have a lot of force there because we got Case Blue going on down here. And kind of interesting thing, paratroopers, etc., unable to really get a solid breakthrough. They pushed things forward, but didn't really get through. And paratroopers are kind of cool. I had to look them up. They drop into the area, they provide a bonus, and then if you take the hex, they do turn into an infantry, which is kind of cool. If you don't take the hex, I guess they can't. I didn't really look that up that carefully. Here, a little bit of a breakthrough with the armor, but at high costs. Didn't really get what I wanted. But down in the south, bang, into Rostov. And actually, they've got their movement after this, in which case they're going to actually take Rostov and maybe swing around a little bit. I'm not sure what's going on there yet. But anyway, that gives you an idea of where we are there. Over on the Turkish front, chasing this guy down and positioning ourselves into a place where the Caucasus is, looking pretty vulnerable at this time. All right, well, mixed feelings about what's happening here. The Germans have a real vulnerability over there in France, but it looks like they're finally breaking the Russian hold that all those extra units in the front were helping with. So I don't know where it's going to go. All right, onward to the Allies. So for the Western Allies over here on the Asian front, we've got an advance going on here with the ABDA Australia. I don't remember what it is. And the attack here resulted in this huge air and naval battle. Most of these counters are from that, and a loss of some Australian infantry that was committed to it. So it was a failure for the Allies. On the other hand, there was a surface fleet used to retake Iwo Jima. There wasn't much the Japanese could do about that. Had they shifted forces there, I'm not sure where they could have gotten them from. These were garrisons. If they weren't busy trying to chase after Kamchatka, they could have retaken Iwo Jima, but now it's fallen to the U.S., and it's an opportunity lost, really, by the Japanese here. So, I don't know, what sort of the net gain is here. They used their troop convoy to slip over here. They could have instead shifted it over to Iwo Jima. It's just tough. They have to defend so many different things. Over to Europe now. So, the Allies have actually punched their way through and taken Paris. Now, if this were a normal minor country, they'd be liberated and they'd come to the board, but because of the Case Yellow effect, the French army has been removed from the game. Only the Vichy army remains. And as far as my reading of the rule, those counters were removed from the game. So the Allies have to fight without France's help here, which makes perfect sense to me. But you can see the Germans are they're going to have a difficult time protecting themselves against this Allied incursion. It isn't taking a lot of forces to push forward and grab Paris. There isn't much in the way. And over here, well, that only 7 doesn't feel like enough to attack yet. But if they have to strip more forces away from Denmark, there's a good chance the Swedes will come across. So the Germans are really on the ropes there in the west. And now we're going to see what the Russians can do in the east. If Germany can be finished off fast enough, maybe the Japanese threat is not as big as it seems. Well, for the Russians, there's not a lot going on in the East Front, even with this assault, but they did manage to pick off a stupid Japanese unit which moved up too close to Ulaanbaatar. They just snagged it with their strength points. They're a little worried here. May have to get something there, but right now they feel pretty secure, actually. Over on the European front, though, wow, what happened? First of all, they're pulling back to Baku, but leaving some forces at Tiflis. Plan is to try to defend Baku as best as possible using, they may have to slap a convoy there if they have one, which they do, in order to supply that if need be, because this road could easily get cut. They've allowed the Germans to come across and cut them off here, but up in the north, wow, they smacked the Germans hard and have driven them back from Leningrad, from Moscow, and they're really kind of pivoting the German army into the less valuable south. How much less valuable? Well, all there is really is Rostov, and they've got that, and they've got Kiev, so there's not a lot of value for a long ways until you hit up here, whatever that is, Kubyshev. The only thing is really turning their flank and trying to get to Moscow. Well, Moscow's a long way from here, and it's getting to be a longer way from here as the Germans are being pushed back towards Poland, and they're in real danger there, actually. Anyway, I guess this is about it. I've got some rolls to make for those forces in the box, but I'll load this up because I'm kind of I have a certain amount of bandwidth for the day coming up, and then I'm going to be working from home for the next couple days. So I want to get this I want to get this loaded before I start working.